Good morning. This is Natalie Gilly with the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. Welcome to the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar. We're excited to have all of you here today, and I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll get started. Today's topic is holding space, being your whole self on a bike. And today is March 16th, 2022. So welcome to the webinar. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat box, please type your name and location and we'll see who's here today. We have a lot of folks in the participating in the webinar today. So this is a statewide network across Minnesota. So we'll see where everyone's from and are excited to welcome you to the webinar. So we have some folks from Elgin, Minneapolis, Rochester, St. Paul, Fergus Falls, more folks from Minneapolis, Olmsted County, Northfield, Richfield, Jackson, Woodbury, lots of folks from across the state today. So welcome to the webinar. This is the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network. Our purpose is to connect local bike walk leaders to share stories and ideas about how they're lifting up the walking and biking culture in their communities. We have a land acknowledgement statement. We want to acknowledge that we occupy the ancestral lands of the several indigenous groups, including the Dakota, Ojibwe, Houchin, Cheyenne, Odo, Iowa, and Meskwaki people. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We affirm the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities. Despite centuries of colonial violence, this is still and always will be Indigenous land. Indigenous people are still here demonstrating innumerable talents and gifts in the midst of continued oppression. They must be celebrated and uplifted. You'll see a link on the screen here, which Ted will put in the chat box if you'd like to find out what land you are currently located on. The network for the Bike Walk leaders has a schedule throughout 2022 with many topics already in place here. In April, we'll be talking about e-bikes. In May, we'll introduce our new our Bike MN education team. So we have two people that are joining, Angela and Helena, and we'll introduce that team more in May. In June, we'll talk about a local event feature, and then we have some other topics coming down the line for Q3 and Q4, so stay tuned. If you're joining as a guest today and you'd like to become a member of the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network, you're welcome to send me an email, natalie@bikemn.org, or follow a link online through our website to request to join. Some of you may also be members of the Safe Routes to School Network. This is one that's moderated by Eric Thompson, and coming down the line for Safe Routes to School in April, they'll be talking about Safe Routes to School. They'll be holding a social hour, it sounds like. In May, the topic will be SHIP, with some major updates coming down the line, and Bike to School Day report. And then in June, the topic is still to be determined. So send an email to erict@movemn.org if you'd like to join that network. So today I'm really excited to welcome our speakers. It's Women's History Month. And so we have some amazing women that are here today to share their stories. And we will be having Alexandera Houchin and Risa Hustad today that will be joining and telling their stories. So I'm really excited about hearing more and learning. Our first speaker will be Alexandera, and I'll just introduce briefly here. The topic will be holding space, being your whole self on the bike. Alexandera will share a message of whatever your age, whatever your gender, whatever your body type, you are a cyclist if you ride your bike. There is no right way to be a cyclist, but knowing the rules of the road and the trail give you greater confidence to take up space in any cycling situation. Alexandera was the winner of the women's 2,700 plus mile Tour Divide mountain bike race in 2018 and 2019. She's currently the single speed women's record holder for the Arizona Trail, Colorado Trail, East and Westbound, and the Tour Divide. She is a citizen of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe, and her reservation is located 20 miles west of Lake Superior in northern Minnesota. Welcome to the webinar, Alexandera.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. I'm coming to you all today from an overpriced cheap hotel in Tucson, Arizona. I'm on bike tour with my partner, and we've been heading north from the Mexico border, and we're on our way to Superior, Arizona. And in a few days, we'll be racing down the Arizona Trail on individual time trial efforts. I just wanted to say a couple prayers here. I just want to thank you guys all for taking some time out of your afternoon there. It's 9:30 here, morning, afternoon, to listen to us speak. I'm grateful for you all, and I'm sending love and good vibes to you and yours. So Anin, hello, Indanuwe, Maganidog, Bongi, Itagon, Nito, Ojibwe. I barely speak any Ojibwe, but Ninga Gagwe, Jitun, Jo, Ojibwe Moyan. I try to use the language where I can. Alexandra and Indigenous, Migizi and Dodem. I grew up near the Rock River in Wisconsin, Kea, Jawanang, Nindun, Jaba. Nagachi Wanang Ninda, kind of. I still call the Fond du Lac Reservation home, but I currently live in the back of my truck with my partner, Johnny. We chase tolerable weather and mountains and spend our time mountain biking. I recently left my white collar training / career path, education path, whatever you would call it, to follow my heart and pursue writing and riding and storytelling full time. It's been through cycling that I discovered ceremony in a way that I never knew really existed. And it's been through cycling that I've really found out who I am and the space that I want to hold in this world. So I just want to say thank you for this invitation. And again, blessings to you and yours. You can do next slide. When I was invited to speak today, I spent time thinking about my life as a cyclist before I became a professional athlete. I was a recreational cyclist as a kid. As you can see, the left side of that slide, there's like a half of me riding a bike. So there is proof. I did ride a bike before I became an adult, but this might have been like 1 of 10 times. My mom would always take us on these bike rides, and of course, I was protesting because I'd rather be sitting on the couch eating Cheetos and playing Mario. But every time we went out, we had a total blast. And as I got older, my grandparents would drag me on bike rides. It was pretty much torture, expecting me to exercise. But I remember after our bike rides, they'd give me string cheese as a snack. And I was like, who eats string cheese by choice? I mean, if I was like going to be eating anything that resembled a cheesy stick, it was definitely going to be a Cheeto. But it's really only now that I think back to my childhood and find respect and admiration for my mother getting us all together to ride bikes. She really did it all. Next slide. Back then, I was terrified of cars, and we'd ride on sidewalks or our trailer park with little regard for the world around us. I eventually moved to Madison and got myself a bicycle to pedal around one of the most bike-friendly places I'd ever lived. And as much as I really never saw myself as a cyclist, I started to ride my bike to and from work. In fact, I recall the first time I got a flat tire, I called the bike shop and was like, I need a new wheel. My tire is flat. And, when I showed up, they told me that I had just had a flat tire and that I didn't, in fact, need an entire new wheel, which was amazing news. But they didn't really explain to me what the $20 they charged me to fix my bike was for. And that was the beginning of my experience of learning how the cycling community treated women and how the industry looked at people who looked like me. I had fallen in love with the bike, but I certainly didn't have enough money to pay somebody else to fix and maintain my bike. So I went ahead and enrolled in YouTube University and, used my special skills of being super annoying to get anybody I knew who knew how to do what I wanted to do to teach me how to do that. I went on to be the first lady mechanic to work in my shop in the city of Madison. Next slide. I spent a lot of years thinking I didn't really belong on the bike because I was fat, or because I was a woman, or because my bike kind of looked like Frankenstein, or I wasn't really that obsessed with being the fastest, at least back then I wasn't. Or I don't know, because I still wore jean shorts on our shop rides, or because I was an Indian, or really, I don't know. I didn't see myself as a cyclist for a plethora of reasons that gave me butterflies before a bike ride. I was always super nervous or felt mildly inadequate, but once I got on the bike and once I felt the wind through my hair and the burning in my lungs, nothing really felt more right. And sure, more often than not, I guess I felt like I was too out of shape, and I wish that I was faster, and I wish that I was lighter, and I wish a million different things. But most of all, I dreamt of letting my bike take me places far away from anything I already knew. So I followed that feeling, or I chased that feeling, I guess. I spent a few years touring my bike on paved roads, and then it took me to gravel roads, and eventually, after lots of dreaming, I made it to the start of the Tour Divide. And this photo here is from my first trip on the Tour Divide in 2015. I had never seen, it was hot down low, and I was wearing a tank top and shorts, and there was all this snow. And at that point, that was the highest summit I had ever been on. And that was really, really the start of the rest of my life. Next slide. The Tour Divide was the hardest thing I'd ever done to that point, but really it was the feeling of peace within myself that I found while I was biking that had me believe that I could actually finish it. And mostly it was sitting in my own internal distress for countless hours in the saddle, where I really began to contemplate my existence and everything about who I am and the ways in which I wanted to hold space. I ended up chasing my bike to Arizona for college. And that's, it's actually right here in Tucson where I am. That's where I learned how to mountain bike and really fell in love with technical trail riding. And that led me to showing up at the starting line for ultra endurance races. I raced the Tour Divide for my first time with the Grand Depart in 2018, 3 years after I had toured it. And I won the women's category, which was mind-blowing to me because I never saw myself as an athlete. Next slide. The more I rode, the more I felt like I belonged. And it was only when I was off the bike, or if I read comments on the internet or heard people kind of mutter things under their breath on race day, that I didn't feel like I belonged. I'd been really good at alley cat races, which are like these urban races that involve a bunch of checkpoint stops. I was terrible at day races otherwise. 50 or 100 miles was just warm up for me. I loved my courier bike community and worked my way into a bike shop community, but I just found the race community to feel so exclusive. Next slide. Finding success, winning some of the women's field was like super surprising for me. But in all my success, being kind of a non-traditional looking athlete, I found that I garnered a platform to talk about what I really care about. And that I'm able to speak about my own internal struggles of yearning to be a bike racer, but also this sense of responsibility and privilege that I'm afforded by all the work the generations of people before me had put in. Through these platforms, I've been able to share stories of how racing my bike is less about playing, but more a form of contemporary Anishinaabe ceremony. You know, I grew up super colonized, with a colonizer education, and really didn't know what ceremony was for a really long time. And I found it through bike racing. Next slide, please. I'm thick-thighed and wide-belly, and I have a monstrous appetite for good food and chocolate. But this year, like, this is the cover of a magazine I had been reading for years, and even just looking at it now makes me emotional. Even talking about it now, you know, I just seen magazine after magazine with, you know, just a young white dude getting rad, and you know, that's awesome, and they should be able to get rad. But there's so much power in seeing somebody who looks like you and the people that you know on the cover of a bike magazine. You know, I just had never, it changed my perception of myself, to be honest. So finally, there's me at that right there. That's an Anishinaabe Kwe, an Ojibwe woman who never really felt like she fit in any world. And I got a belly, and sometimes my skin's brown. But reflecting back to the point of being able to be on a cover, my mind wanders to like all these tiny things of like delivering packages as a courier in the snow or the wind or the rain. And I remember learning traffic laws and the pattern of traffic, and this change in myself, realizing that I was on a vehicle and I became a machine when I was attached to my bicycle. Next slide. So by showing up and following my heart and listening to my inner self, I realized that I didn't need anybody else's validation to show up. I only had to pedal, and I only had to be myself. And I only had to hold enough space to pedal forward, to walk forward if the riding was too hard. I honestly will probably never look like a cyclist that you would Google, like if you typed in the word cyclist. Next slide. But I will always look like an Anishinaabe Kwe, a sister, a daughter, an auntie, a friend, a cousin, a farmer, because those are the parts of me that make up who I am. And my bicycle knows that. And because I ride my bike to know myself, I am a cyclist. And the me that I show up to, or the me that I show up as while I ride my bike, is the best version of a cyclist that I could possibly be. And I always hold space for myself in this way. And I invite you to hold space for yourself in whichever way makes you feel seen too. Miigwech, meet you, that's all.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. This is amazing.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. I'm so grateful.
So I'm just kind of taking this all in, and this is really cool to see all of these pictures and hear your story and how you've weaved the bike, weaves in and out of these different stories and finding yourself. And it's just really cool. I'm going to look to see if we have any questions in the chat box or from any of the participants on the webinar here. And it looks like there's quite a few people that have been chatting on here. So I'll just pause for a moment. Does anyone have any questions that you would like to ask Alexandra? Feel free to unmute yourself. When you joined the webinar today, you were muted. So feel free to unmute and ask a question if you'd like.
This is CJ. I've got a question.
Hi.
Thank you so much for sharing. My question is, what do you have ideas about what are some ways in which we can support kids in particular who may not feel that cycling is for them? What are some of the things that they might be missing that the community can offer?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And that's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about because I used to serve on our Safe Routes to School panel back on the reservation. I think it's really It starts at the family level. I think that for a lot of us, I guess I'll speak to my own experience, seeing the adults that I know riding bikes, I think is really important. Like, we can't expect our children to be like, hey, go ride your bike to school, or go ride your bike to the store, just go ride your bike for fun, if they don't see their adults doing that. If they see us, sitting on our cell phones or doing whatnot, of course they're going to want to be like us. So I think we need to start at the family level and kind of normalize it in the home, and in the community, having adults riding bikes, having community ride bikes. Yeah.
Thanks, CJ. Thanks for all of this information here. There's quite a few comments. I'm going to just read through a couple of them, and then if other people want to ask a question, feel free to do so. We have lots of thank yous in the chat box here. What an incredible inspiration. Thank you so much for your sharing, Alexandra. Thank you for sharing how bicycling enabled you to find your true self. I can feel your connectedness. Thank you for sharing your story, your vulnerability, and your passion for bicycling. So those are just a few of the comments from the chat box here that people have shared.
Those are all super kind words. And I mean, I just can't emphasize enough how much bikes change lives. And it just seemed like it, for the longest time, it was just my hobby. I was like, okay, I'm gonna ride bikes on the summers when I'm on break from college. Or I didn't go to college until I was almost 30. So I spent a lot of years before that just bike touring. And I was like, okay, it's probably time to grow up and I should probably go to school and do these things. But the more I biked, the more I just realized I could never give it up. Once you push yourself really, really far, it's hard to ever go back.
Wonderful. We do have a question here from Dorian, if you'd like to ask.
Hi, thanks so much for sharing. That's really fun news. As someone who raced for 15 years, could you share a little bit about, how hard it is, how much you've worked to get to where you are?
Sure. It's been incredibly challenging. I think the very first ultra endurance race, I mean, that's where I found my specialty. It's like, it takes me a couple 100 miles or like 18 hours to really get warmed up. But I went to the first starting line in 2017. I did this race called the Boise Smoke and Fire, and it's like 420 miles. And I didn't bring a sleep kit because I was like, I can go fast. First off, it was in mountains. I was from sea level, so that was challenging. But not having a sleep kit, I just brought this blue tarp, and there's like 70 riders that started, and of the 30 or 40 people that finished, or the 30 or 40 people who finished, I was third to last place. And the only two people that I beat was this guy, Russ, who was sitting in the hot springs every time I passed him. So he was not really racing as hard as I was. And this older guy, Larry Cotters, I think he was like 70. And I beat him only by like 6 hours. And I just had no idea for how hard it was. And then I kept signing up at starting lines, and I get the privilege of being able to talk about my wins, the few races that I've gotten to win for the women's category. But for all of those wins, there's about 20 miserable, embarrassing losses on the other side. But it's been a life-changing thing, for so long trying to juggle racing and training and a full-time career, and ultimately having, the physical part of this sport is hard, but it's also faith that, I just left all my jobs and I'm hoping biking will work out. And that's a different kind of hard. So it's this ultra stuff is purely mental, I would say. It's all from the brain.
Thank you.
Alexandra, we have another question in the chat box here. The comment and then a question. This is from Nick. I'm in awe of your leadership. Do you have new personal goals of using that leadership in the movement that you'd like to share?
I would love to call them goals. Right now, I feel like they're just dreams. I'm not exactly sure what my vision holds. I do know that just in that experience of seeing myself on the cover of a bike magazine, I literally had never seen any Native people on the cover of sports anything. I never heard about Native people. I never got to look up to or seek out other Native people doing any of the things that I've been able to do. So I feel like continuing to hold space as an Indigenous woman in the cycling scene is something that I'm going to do. And I don't know what that holding space is going to look like. Inserting myself into sometimes awkward situations and having to work it's always work, because people have, and I'm not blaming people, but people still have this Indian mysticism about them, and there's lots of microaggressions that happen every single day. So just holding space and, not being offended, which takes work, or not being hurt, which takes work, to tell a story as a contemporary Native woman. So I don't know. I'm dreaming. I don't know what it'll look like. I just keep saying yes and trying to do hard, fun things.
One last closing question before we go to our other presenter today. Do you have a favorite place to ride in Minnesota?
There's such good riding in Minnesota. I do love all the trails in Duluth, but every year for the past 3 years, I've ridden the John Bear Grease sled dog route in the deep winter, starting in Duluth and going all the way up to Grand Portage. And it all goes through 1854 treaty area. And it's like the most sacred, beautiful, amazing country to ride your bike in. So hands down, the section of trail, the John Bear Grease Trail from Duluth all the way to Grand Portage. I know it's a cop out. It's a lot of ground to cover, but really anywhere along the North Shore is extraordinary riding.
Fabulous. Well, Alexandra Miigwech, this last closing comment was a great presentation, and appreciate that you shared your story. It's very inspirational. Thank you so much.
Miigwech, thanks for having me.
So we'll have the other speaker present at this point in time, and then we will have an opportunity at the end for any additional questions that you might have. And I'll go ahead and introduce our second speaker today. Our second speaker is Risa Hustad. Risa was the winner of the Women's Arrowhead Ultra in 2020. They race winter ultras, gravel, and cyclocross. They're an environmental justice organizer. Welcome to the webinar, Risa.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for having me. This is going to be a tough act to follow, and I will do my very best. I just want to take note. I just want to name something, something that came up a lot in Alexandra's presentation. This idea of being in space where people don't expect you. People expect a cyclist to look like a fit, white, cisgendered man, and a lot of us aren't that. And that feeling where we're taking up space in a place that doesn't welcome us, or it doesn't have that space set aside for us, that feeling that we feel of maybe I shouldn't be here, that's called imposter syndrome. And I, that's a feeling that I relate to. I think that most people that I know who are genderqueer or not white, or in some way not represented in our community, are feeling this feeling at the back of our minds all of the time. I'm an imposter. I don't belong here. Everybody knows it, and I should disappear. And this is something that we have to consider when we're engaging with other folks who want to be part of our community. Is, not just that person showed up, great, but also that person had a huge barrier to show up. So recognizing that and working as a community with it, I think, is a hugely important thing that we all can do. But yeah, my name is Risa Hustad. I had the great pleasure of growing up as a bike shop brat. So bikes have always been in my life. And this opening slide, this is a picture of my dad riding with me on a bike before I could bike, or probably before I could really walk. So I've always had that great privilege. And my bikes have brought me to all of my favorite adventures. You can flip to the next slide, Natalie. And I've gotten a lot of great opportunities to explore on my bike. I've gotten to race winter ultras in international falls. On the top right, you can see that's my bike setup for racing. The Arrowhead 135, which I managed to not finish 5 times in a row, and then 6 times the charm I got to win, which is great. And then the bottom left there, that's a gravel race down south. And I just like, I get to travel all over Minnesota and even all over the world, riding my bike and enjoying what the bike has to offer. And it's definitely not without, in the background thinking like, do I belong here? Are people accepting of me and taking up this space? You can flip to the next slide. And what I've found is there's always a community ready to make the bike the place I need to be. This is just a picture of me and my friends hanging out on some gravel roads in southern Minnesota. You can see my friend Rebecca has some baby food in their mouth. This is the tip I have for everybody today. If you're not trying to break the bank on nutrition, but you need a quick pick-me-up that is not a $5 goo packet, baby food, applesauce, all those little packets, you can get those at any grocery store and they'll do exactly the same thing for you, but they won't taste awful. And we have so many great opportunities in our state to explore whatever on the bike. We have the 3rd most road miles of any state in the US. So we're maintaining and building more places to adventure all the time. You can pop to the next slide. This is just a quick picture of my bike next to the Sawbill Landing a couple of years ago. My friends and I just decided like, oh, we're going to do a tour around the North Shore, around Grand Marais. So this is like maybe 10 miles west of where you picture Grand Marais being on a map. And just a lot of great fun, a lot of like, hey, let's go out, let's go camping. Let's not go race bikes, but let's go just see how to have fun over several days. I'm a very competitive person. I like racing. I like performing against my peers, against my friends. But I've gotten to have a lot of fun just doing bike packing trips by myself and with my friends. Next slide, please. So I'm a person who I try to do everything on a bike. See what all I can get up to on my bike, and I feel like it's really enriched my whole life. There's not anything that I found that was less fun to get to on a bike or to do on a bike than any other mode of transportation. That opportunity, however, has presented significant risks, significant challenges. You can flip to the next slide. I'm a person who has had friends killed by drivers, friends who have been like really hurt by our infrastructure, and unfortunately had the experience of organizing this event that we called the Human Protected Bike Lane, when one of the members of our community was struck and killed by a driver for operating safely and efficiently in the infrastructure that we're given. So I don't want to dwell too much on the morbid here, but you can have a functional bike, you can have the right headspace, you can have overcome the imposter syndrome of being a person on a bike, and there are parts of our built environment that are not designed for us and that are going to cause risks to us. And knowing that and being the person that I am, something that this meant for me is that I had to become more civically engaged to represent not just people who look like me on a bike, but also people who bike to people who aren't thinking about us. You can flip to the next slide. So I've gotten to do a lot of fun advocacy work and a lot of boring advocacy work. And even so far as last year running for office, because it meant that I was able to talk to more people, have a wider platform about the things that we all care about. Running for office is grueling and I don't recommend it to anybody. It was a lot of work. But I do think that everybody who rides a bike, being a person on a bike necessitates us being a little bit involved in our local community or in our statewide networks, because folks need to hear from us. Our built environment right now is predicated on an idea that we are inherently unsafe when we're traveling outside of cars, and that's not the future that we want to build for the future of our bike community. That's not the future that we want to pass off to our kids. So you can flip to the next slide. While I want to make sure that everybody has opportunities, every type of person comes with their full self on the bike, and I try to facilitate that by leading or enjoying or participating in a lot of different kinds of group rides, a lot of different kinds of workshops and sessions. You can see on the left, big old group ride with just a bunch of other femmes. We were just like, hey, we're gonna go on a bike ride. It's gonna be, I don't know, between 5 and 50 people. Let's go. And on the right, a cyclocross workshop. So teaching skills about this really particular kind of riding a bike, and just making sure that we have space for our whole community there. But I also want folks to think about the bigger picture. What about our shared public space is welcoming or inhibiting people like us, people who show up on bikes, to exist there. You can flip to the next slide. So that's that. I'd love it if anybody has any questions or follow-up that's on their mind. Feel free if you want to drop questions in the chat or come off mute. Otherwise, my email address and phone number, anytime. Reach out and I'd be happy to connect with you on whatever you're working on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Risa. Thank you so much for sharing your story and all these different aspects of riding your bike. You'll see on the screen that Risa has an email address and phone number up. If you'd like to take that down, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so we can see each other, and then we'll shift over to take any questions. Risa, we do have some comments in the chat box that we're grateful for your presence here today on the webinar. And Alexandra made a comment about a race that you had participated in, and yay, that's such a hard race, and giving you some kudos for that. There was folks commenting about the fruit pouches. Thanks for the tip. So people are learning something today. And just many thanks on here about your campaign, and grateful for the difference you're making. And then just calling attention to the realities we're all facing on our roadways. So those were some of the questions, or some of the comments in the chat box that people have shared. So I'll pause for a moment here. If anyone would like to take themselves off mute and ask a question of Risa, you're welcome to do that.
Natalie, it's Dorian. I'll ask. Risa, you're a bike commuter. Can you talk a little bit about that and what role that's played in your training and just getting around? I know you said you run every errand on your bike, but commuting is a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm a person who, as often as I can, I ride my bike to my workplace. I actually just got a bus route that will take me 10 miles closer, or cut 10 miles off of my commute. So I'm feeling like I'm getting a little bit lazy lately because I give myself a little bus boost in the winter, which is great, truly great. But yeah, for me, commuting by bike is part of my routine. It's something that I know it makes me more productive when I show up at work. It makes me happier and more excited when I am ready to leave work. And it gives me a lot better of a work-life balance. When I drive to work, I know I show up and I'm like kind of groggy and I'm not really ready to start my day. So while it takes me a little bit longer to ride my bike into work, it does a load of good things for my actual work once I'm there. With that being said, there are a lot of times, especially like bad weather events during the year, where it does become really hard to convince yourself to be a bike commuter. But I think that pays dividends for my bike racing, because you don't get to choose the weather on your target event day. So having that routine of I'll ride my bike in any weather, it makes my commitment to just like, hey, I was hoping that this race was going to start at 45 degrees and sunny, and it's 33 degrees and rainy. That's okay. I know what to wear at 33 degrees and rainy, because that's what I wore during my commute, last Wednesday. I think it does great things for me as a person who races on my bike. I think real quick, I will say it's important to factor in your commute to your training plan if you have one. The kind of work that you're doing when you're commuting is a little bit different than what a lot of like coaches say would recommend you do. So there's like extra and different fatigue that commuting applies to your body. Just a little caveat. Go ahead.
Thanks, Teresa. We have a comment on here from Jean. Agree on the bike commuting. Always felt better and more engaged on the days I rode into work. We also have another question in the chat box. You've had a lot of experience with organizing and advocating for better cycling. What are some of your biggest lessons learned or tips for being effective?
Yeah, great question. And I'm still learning. Everybody in this room is a great bicycle advocate in their own right, and I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom here. A couple things that I think are really important in bicycle advocacy: build your community and strengthen your network before you need it. So make sure that like spaces like this, where you can, build friendships and build working relationships with other people who share your values, early and often is a great asset. It's really important when you notice something where you're like, this is out of place. This needs attention right now. It's important to be able to like pick up the phone and say, hey, Risa, thanks for sharing your phone number on that slide last week. I have a question for you. Would you send this kind of email to this important person, kind of thing? Would you sign off on this petition for this bridge, this Greenway edition, et cetera, et cetera. And criticizing in private and praising in public is, a tip that I don't love it. I think that, when elected people and people who are working on behalf of our cities, our counties, our states are doing bad things, I would like to be able to publicly criticize those folks. But I try my hardest to build relationships and reserve criticisms of elected people, of city, county, or state employees to one-on-one interactions whenever possible. That isn't to say that I don't go ahead and make public criticisms as necessary, but the value of a working relationship with your elected people, with city, county, and state employees, that's more important than like getting a quick dunk on social media or getting a one-liner in your local paper if you want to say something about a person not doing or acting or behaving in the way that you expect them to. So whenever possible, say, hey, thank you so much for paying attention to this thing in public, and then keeping your criticisms for folks to those one-on-one conversations.
Risa, we have a question in the chat box that shifts us to the topic of children. Any thoughts about working with kids to encourage them to be riders and or bike advocates themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that most kids, they don't need a lot of help being good bike advocates. Most kids are really excited to be on the bike. They're really excited to most kids, they see themselves as like, oh, bike is a fun place where after I go for a bike ride, I get Cheetos or whatever fun thing they associate with bikes. One of the local middle schools near me, they have an annual bike ride, and one problem is like excluding children because 100 kids will sign up for their annual bike ride, and there's only enough chaperones for 50 kids or something like that. So that's a concern in and of itself. But kids are already like ready-made bike advocates because they love to ride bikes. They love to do the thing with all the other kids. And the things that we could do to support them are encourage them, be the adult chaperone that's like, yep, we're gonna ride 1 mile in that direction and 1 mile back. Like, here is how to operate the safety features on your bike. Here is a working bike. Eliminate those barriers to the kid themselves, and then supporting safe infrastructure, like supporting our all ages and abilities bicycle network, making sure that the space that we're inhabiting is safe for them.
Thanks. That's so important. And, there are many folks that are on this webinar today that are also part of the Safe Routes to School network and do some of that work. So that's great to hear some of those tips. So here's a question. This one kind of puts you on the spot, Risa. If you were appointed the next MnDOT commissioner, what would be your first order of business?
If I was the MnDOT commissioner?
That is the question. Yes, MnDOT commissioner. What would be your first order of business?
Yeah, I think that I would unequivocally accept all of the stack recommendations to update our transportation policies. Right now, we effectively just kind of lean on a series of several dozen engineers who are older than two of me, whose backgrounds, frankly, like don't reflect common sense modern engineering traffic standards. And we have a lot of community members who are passionate, who are smart, who are driven, and who are trying to represent us Minnesotans to the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And currently we treat the stack like it's the, you know, the sad back row at a concert where we're like, we hear from them, but we would rather take those volunteers who are spending hours and hours a month contributing feedback and make some notes of it and never look at it again. And we can change that tomorrow. I hope that the next commissioner takes seriously the hard fought contributions that our stack and our other advocates have brought to the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Real quick, sorry for the alphabet soup. Sustainable Transportation Advisory Committee.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing the acronym there too, and some call to action here about what's next. So I have one more slide I want to share on the screen. And before I get to that slide, it is related to events and one of the closing questions I see in the chat box here. So the question is, are there any current group rides, groups or rides that you suggest for someone looking to get into riding with other folks, especially folks looking to build the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that group rides are happening all over the state. I can speak most to the Twin Cities right now, but I know that the Iron Range has group rides going. I know that Grand Marais and Duluth have group rides going. So maybe if you're a person in those areas, if you want to drop in the chat what's going on in your home area, I'd just open that space. But you know, something that I'm looking forward to in the next couple of weeks. So Saturday, the kickoff ride for 30 days of biking is happening in Minneapolis. And I love those rides. I love getting to see people for sometimes the first time after a long winter. A lot of folks don't necessarily ride in the winter, so I don't get to see them. And those kinds of communities where there are like no drop rides, low or no barrier to entry. Those are the kinds of rides that I look forward to coming into spring.
Wonderful. Thanks, Risa. And I put up a slide on the screen here. This is just some upcoming events. We've been doing a closing slide when we hold these monthly webinars to just share some of the upcoming events between this webinar and our April one. So we have a couple here that are highlighted in the Twin Cities Metro on March 28th. This is an online ride, diversifying cycling with stamina and TCBC, Twin Cities Bicycle Club. And then the 30 days of biking, as Risa mentioned. So, get signed up, ride your bike every day during the month of April, participate on April 2nd and 3rd in the e-bike challenge at the convention center. And then in greater Minnesota, April 2nd, Ragnarok 105 in Red Wing, April 23rd, 8th day gravel grinder in Northfield. And on April 24th, the Maysville 56 in Maysville, Cannon Falls area. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list. This is just a couple of events that are happening coming down the line here. And then we definitely invite you to join us again on April 20th for our next Leadership Network webinar. So I'll hold just a moment here for each of our speakers to give any closing comment that you would like to add. Risa, did you want to give one? And then I'll hand it over to Alexandra.
Sorry, I was distracted by the chat. Can you say that one more time, please?
No problem. Did you have any closing words of wisdom, any tips or anything that you wanted to mention to the group before we close out the webinar?
Oh yeah, just keep the rubber side down. If you push on the pedals and the rear wheel spins, that's a good bike.
Wonderful. All right. So Alexandra, did you want to give any closing comments to the group? Thank you so much.
Risa, that was great. I don't think I can top that. I say that you should just show up, even if you don't know anyone, even if you don't have any friends going to some event you hear about. Show up and the friends will follow.
Very cool. Well, this was a wonderful presentation from both of our speakers today about community and ride your bike. And it's at being Women's History Month, this was just a fantastic combination of presentations today. We're so grateful that you were here and shared this time with us today. To the speakers, Alexandera Houchin and Risa Hustad, and to all of you, the participants of the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network. Thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate you, and we'll see you again in April.